I want to welcome James Lilley, the Director of the All IP Programme at Openreach. Welcome to The Voice for the BSIA. Good to see you.
Hi Dave, thank you for the invite.
No problem, that's great. Wanted to talk today about the All IP migrations and the actual closure of the PSTN network. We've both been on this forever. I think probably 2016, 2018, I think it was. But yeah, I guess just wanted to sort of have a quick catch up on where we are now and what we think is going to happen when it finally closes. So maybe we start with that. Where are we up to at the moment, James, from Openreach's point of view?
Yeah, where we're up to. Yes, I think we're probably a couple of the longest standing people that have been on this pretty much since the start. I think 2018. I think we started now. So and we're now into the final year. So yeah, we've got January 2027 as our end date that hopefully everybody knows and is well understood. But we started this journey, I think, with about 16.5 million customers to move off the network back in 2018, and we're kind of 85% of the way there, so we're down to the last 2.5 million now. But that is a 2.5 million of harder stuff left to move.
Got the easy ones out of the way first.
We've got a lot of the easy ones done, but it's human nature, isn't it? You leave the hardest stuff to the end, and that's kind of what we're seeing. And so we've got a couple of million, as I say, still to do for the final year. And in that couple of million, there is a lot of stuff that is vulnerable customer telecare alarm related, for example, which has been a well publicised discussion across the industry certainly on the telecare customer stuff. A lot of care and attention's been put into how we safely move those customers, but there's a lot of businesses that are still on the network, and businesses can use the PSTN for all sorts of weird and wonderful things as we learn, be it payment card terminals, be it lottery machines, be it alarms in shops, and things like that that are still there, as long as well as some of the residential customers that are still on the network at the moment to move. So still a lot to go at in the final year, but we've probably never been better placed in the industry. I'm talk about the telco industry here, to be able to offer customers alternatives for all the use cases that use the PSTN today.
Wow, yeah. And I guess with those 3 million, they're probably the more tougher ones. It's probably hard to equate in our industry terms how many of those are still in ours. I mean, I did some sort of rough figures based on a recent survey on ours, saying that we reckon from the ARCs, and there's probably up to about 100 ARCs in the UK that will have some connectivity, and I think just getting some sort of a barometer on this as to where the industry is at sort of suggests that we could be around about 270,000 connections still on the PSTN, and I sort of thinking that's like near on 10% of where your 3 million is. I mean, would you say, or would you even know whether that 3 million includes a majority of vulnerable or possibly those with alarms, or is that just generally because you've got people who just don't communicate back?
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to tell ultimately, because a lot of what is on the PSTN, we can't see what it's used for. Certainly as Openreach, because obviously we sell our services to a communication provider who then maybe sells them 2 or 3 times on down a chain of different providers before they actually get to the final use case. So it's difficult for us to always tell exactly what a line's being used for. So we do have to estimate some of this. We think we've got about 500,000 business lines left on the network at the moment, so probably a good proxy for some of this stuff falling into the business space. And then there's various estimates of how much telecare is left on the network. A couple of 100,000 maybe a telecare left on the network. So it kind of resonates that point. We are into the hard stuff that's left. I think this, over the last 12 months in particular, we've done a lot of work across the industry on getting products and services ready for these more complex types of customers. So telecare alarms, there's now services in place with our engineering workforces where if you're moving to our new fibre products, for example, engineers visiting the customer will test the device works before and after a migration, so that we don't ever leave customers without a working device. That's specifically telecare out there at the moment, but we've also got new business managed install products, we call them. So what our engineers will do when they go on a business site, and you can imagine if you're a business site migrating, you might have lots of internal wiring around the business. So when you go and put fibre in, you might need a bit more cabling, you might need the fibre put in different bits of the business. So there's services now that we offer our engineers will do a lot of that when they're providing you fibre services. So, you know, we learned a lot for the first few years of the programme that have translated into different services for businesses in particular to take and move. And then also we've got, you know, new products in the market as well, because there will be use cases that just don't react and don't move by the deadline, or maybe fibre's not the right answer for it right now for that particular circumstance. So there are products in the market now that use the Openreach network that are sold by communication providers that will kind of emulate what the PSTN does as a bit of a fallback last resort option, if we just need to manage some of the customers' use cases that, as I say, fibre might not be the answer for them right now. And that's an important part of the jigsaw, I think, for Jan 27.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things, asking the question about things like what are the biggest blockers. I mean, you mentioned CPs, and I think you know, of all the times I've been on all of your industry updates, and again, this really came out as a result of the December one, which again, you know, looking at some of what's going on there's a lot of activity you guys are doing to try and promote raise the awareness, and I guess the CPs I've always seen when I've been on these calls, it's almost like, you know, because they're your customers, aren't they, I guess, at the end of the day, and getting them to move over is the same problem we see as an industry, that we've got our installers who are saying to customers, this is changing, you need to do something. And you know, that's probably one of the big blockers we get, is that customers are like, well, there's nothing wrong with it, it's working, and they may not have been approached by their CP. And I think on some of the updates I've seen that I've been on the calls with you, that's been your problem too, hasn't it? It's trying to get that engagement from them. Do you see that as a big issue as we start to move it? We're in this last 12 months now.
Yeah, and part of the problem we always had was no one ever really believes you're going to turn it off. And when no one believes you're going to turn it off, then people wait, right, to see what happens. So we came out in late November, early December last year with what does the final 12 months of the PSTN look like, and some of the things we're doing as Openreach to encourage our communication provider customers to move, which, you know, will have an impact as it flows down through to users of the services. So there's a few things we talked about in December. So firstly, we announced a bunch of price rises for the last year of the programme. So we got some staged price increases. So this is what Openreach will charge its customers. And some CPs may pass that on, some may not. It depends on what they do commercially. But they're quite big price rises, and they're basically aimed at making sure that, you know, there is some commercial jeopardy to staying on the network. And, you know, if you're still on the PSTN by October this year, you know, it's essentially will be double what the price is today for a PSTN line. So that's one part of what we announced. The second part is we also announced some incentives as well. So we give our communication providers some incentives to connect to fibre. So in most of those cases, we waived the connection charges to fibre. So again, taking off some of the commercial pressure to move. So you know, a lot of CPs will be using those to market to their customers and sell. So there's a lot of good reasons to get on fibre as we go forward. And we also reconfirmed that we're going to hit our 25 million FTTP or fibre to the premise, which is the new best stuff to be on, the fibre optic stuff, the super reliable good stuff. You want to be on that. That will be at 25 million premises by the end of 2026. So, you know, we're on target to hit our aims of covering, which is nigh on 2/3 of the country by 2026. So from that perspective, there's some commercial elements in there. But we also announced a couple of other things. One is we're stepping up our marketing and awareness on this for the final year. So we have a load of revamps of the Openreach.com website, which will provide a lot of information for folks that just want to understand a bit more about what this means, and there'll be messages for consumers and for businesses in that revamp. We're also doing a lot in trade press. So you'll see us out and about a lot more in trade press and mainstream media as well. Actually, we've done quite a bit of stuff recently with the big trade stuff that the majority of people will read as well. So there'll be a lot more general public awareness through that kind of medium that as much as Openreach can do, again, because they're not our direct customers, the users of the services, we're slightly limited in what we can do. And then I think one of the other things is, how do we support in giving as much credibility to the message that this is happening as possible through things like working with the government? So, the Department for Science, DSIT we'll have obviously web presence pointing at what the PSTN is as well. So, pointing anyone that's interested at these kind of trusted areas and sites, for info is quite important, as well as Ofcom's pages on that. And then the final big thing we announced was what happens at the end. So if you are still on the network on the 31st of January 2027, what happens? And I guess this was the big bit, really, to show that we've got a real credible path to actually turning this thing off now, is that we will essentially pick up anyone that is left and we'll move them to like an emergency voice service at the end. And that is going to run on a different technology to the PSTN, but one that supports the basic kind of voice features that the PSTN will support today. So if you've got something plugged into your phone socket at home or at work, then it, in majority of cases, will work if we lift it and move it over to this new thing at the end. And really, that's a temporary solution that will be around for a short while, but it's a way to make sure that we don't have a lot of customers losing services at the end of January 2027. So whilst it's a great safety blanket, it's not something that we're suggesting people should wait for and wait to be put on, and there's a number of reasons for that. One, it will be temporary, but second is it's not got as many bells and whistles as the PSTN. We won't service it as much as we do the PSTN, so in terms of response times for repair and things like that, and the pricing will be higher than the PSTN. So there's a lot of reasons not to wait to be moved on to that at the end.
I think there's a few great nuggets of information you gave in there. Certainly going back on the things like the work you're doing to raise the awareness. We've used a lot of signposting on our website. We've signposted to Openreach's site, because I know John Livermore, one of your guys, actually worked with me to actually pull together what does an alarm system mean, and what does that mean on the PSTN. And again, I'm sort of guessing that it's still that type of information that's available, because we also signpost our companies, our members, and hopefully the members' customers, because at the end of the day we're trying to reach out to the end users here, because it's them that need that confidence of what I'm being told is right. I do need to move off, and I'm really up for the ideas you're talking about, raising the awareness with the trade press. We've got trade press specific to our industry. If there's anything we can do that you want to come through us, we've got a comms team here that are always looking for the next good stories. This is exactly the sort of thing that I think could maybe a bit of a catalyst for that. And if there is some messaging you want to get through our trade press, we've got that ability hopefully to push on that one. And again, national press, we asked for national press from day one, but clearly I guess it all had to go through a phased sort of way of doing it. I think anything like that's good. Really interested about the I think you call it evac, don't you?
We do, yes.
Which is just, it just looks like, it just seems like some military operation that's going to happen on the
marketing,
first
as marketing excellence goes in Openreach product descriptions. Evac's probably as close as description as you'll get to being evacuated at the end. I think
it sounded like that. It did sound a little bit like that. I suppose from our company's point of view, and our members, is that we had some experience of, I guess PDPL was one of the known sort of systems that is out there. Is it the PDPL type service that the evac is working on? Is that, or is it a different new technology that we've not seen yet? No,
it's the same underlying technology. It's the same equipment essentially that sits in the exchanges that powers it. Openreach is just productizing it in a different way than, say, BT have, for example, that are selling pre-digital phone or PDPL. So we've deliberately, quite frankly, set it up in a way that has less features and capabilities in the PSTN, because we don't want people on it and we don't want people hanging about on it. So it really is emergency in that sense at the end. So anyone that does get put on it, we are expecting to very quickly want to either that be the trigger to go and move to a fibre alternative and migrate to a longer term product, or potentially maybe you're in that position because your CP hasn't supported you and you found yourself in a position where you've put on this thing, actually maybe it's the trigger to go and find another supplier that will support you onto something new, and to move off it in the future. So I suspect if you end up on this thing at the end, it's either because not responded to calls to move, or not been supported by your supplier in terms of how you're been asked to migrate.
And I guess whilst we're in the period now running up to this closure date, as we go back to 3 million lines, I mean that's about 270,000 a month. Big figures to move about, and of course, as you said, the CPs have got to really be engaged in this to make sure that they're moving across, which makes you think there's going to be a lot of bulk migration going across, and I suppose that always worries our alarm receiving centres, because big things that move, that fail, cause a huge lot of activity over a period of time, and usually these things happen at early hours of the morning, and that's when the ARCs are just monitoring for issues that happen. Again, I know we've done a couple of initiatives with yourselves supporting us, which was actually providing alarm receiving centre line numbers. We've shared that data with the OTA2, so it's available for CPs to use. Again, I guess hopefully you'd agree, CPs to get to that information is important. It would give them an opportunity to know what alarm lines look like. That would be really helpful to our industry, just to try and mitigate potential risks of swapping over. So I guess the key message there was CPs get that engagement. Really important to us as an industry. No doubt important to you as your customers. And again, leaving it to the end, even though there's a temporary solution, that the message clearly has got to be, don't leave it till the end. Get moving now, because if I understand it, we're already starting some of these larger migrations now. Is that probably a fair statement?
So we're currently moving about 50,000 customers a week. So it's kind of like a decent football stadium a week of customers. So we're doing big numbers, and that's obviously across the country as we move. And we'll continue to do those kind of numbers probably right up until the end. There are some big scale migration programs that you mentioned. So there are a lot of voice only customers going through moves at the moment onto lots of different technologies, fibre, some of the products we mentioned that emulate the PSTN as well. And there's a lot of telecare customers going through the migrations at the moment as well. So there's a lot of care and attention going on certain types and cohorts of customers to make sure that we move them safely. But we're doing big numbers already. We'll continue to do them, and I think having data that you mentioned on alarm numbers and stuff is massive goodness to share around, and we'll play our part in making sure as many of our CPs can use that data as possible in their records. I think we've got 300 CPs I think still using the PSTN at the moment, so it's a long tail.
It's a lot, isn't it?
There's a long tail of customers, so there's a lot to get through. But we're certainly advocate sharing as much of that type of info as possible, so they can understand who's using their services.
Well, I think we've had a really good relationship to date anyway, and I think long may that continue whilst we're still trying to get this off. If there's one final closing message, what would your end message to users be? Users of alarm systems or in the household?
I would say, if you haven't either heard of this program or the need to move off a PSTN, or you haven't had your manufacturer or your telecom supplier talk to you about it, then actually you should be quite worried about that. I think you should actually now start thinking about reaching out to those and asking the questions about what do I need to do. And if you're not getting support from some of those, certainly in the telecom space, if you're not getting support from your telecom supplier for this, then maybe you need to go and find one that will support you, because there's many out there that will support you in moving. But ask the questions, be inquisitive about, will my devices work, what is this PSTN move about, and what alternatives have I got in terms of services that I can move to, because you need to be asking those questions now so that you can get the right support from your supplier in the coming months. Yeah, and I think it'd probably be appropriate I answer the one about installers and ARCs, because it would be a very similar
message actually is, although the CPs are the relationship with the client, those who've got alarm systems, fire, security, video even, again, if you're whoever maintains your alarm system or monitors it, you need to be in touch with these people now. If you're not already doing that, it's really important for exactly the same reasons that James has mentioned. You need to be aware what the options are. I'm totally aware that our manufacturing sort of I guess database across the UK, they clearly have products which support on the new all IP network, and I suppose that's really the message is IP is where the world has moved to. And again, you know, whilst the PSTN has been a fantastic and reliable product, it's at its day and it's clearly moving. So I think that's the message for the installers and the ARCs as well, is that, you know, make sure that they get in touch with their clients as well. I know a lot of them do. I know it's difficult sometimes for clients to think, why do I need to do this? You know, there's multiple messages going out from you guys, from us, from, as you said, the government department, DSIT. And there's plenty of information out there to actually to prove this is genuine. As you say, people do need to make sure they've got products which are fit for the next century. So no, that's great. I think that probably is a great update, James, in terms of where we're at, where we're going. And again, I'm sure we'll probably do this again soon. Thank you so much for your time today.